My rich uncle didn't know my phone number. For most of my life, he didn't know where I worked, what I studied, what I cared about, or even whether I had children. But he knew my name. At least, he knew it when he needed someone to compare me to. Why can't you be more ambitious like your cousin? Your uncle built everything from nothing. Some people are just born with a business mind. That was what my family said whenever they wanted to make me feel small. My uncle Victor was the kind of man everyone admired. He owned a chain of upscale furniture stores. He lived in a huge house behind gates. He drove expensive cars, wore expensive watches, and donated money to local events so people would praise him in public. At family gatherings, everyone waited for him to arrive. When he walked through the door, conversations changed. People stood up. My parents smiled differently. My cousins suddenly became quieter. And me? I was usually standing near the kitchen, holding someone's coat or helping my aunt carry dishes. Victor never insulted me directly. That would have required him to notice me. He just treated me like I was too ordinary to matter. Until the day his company was falling apart. Until the day he found out the one person who could help him was the nephew he had ignored for 28 years. Welcome back to Calm Verdict Stories. If you enjoy emotional stories about family karma, respect, boundaries, quiet success, and life lessons, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because today's story is for anyone who has ever been overlooked by family, until the people who ignored you suddenly needed something from you. My name is Noah. I grew up in a small apartment above my father's auto repair shop. My dad was Victor's younger brother. The difference between them was obvious from the beginning. Victor was loud. My dad was quiet. Victor took risks. My dad valued stability. Victor wanted people to know when he succeeded. My dad just wanted to come home after work, wash the grease off his hands, and eat dinner with his family. When they were younger, my dad and Victor had actually been close. They started a small furniture moving business together after high school. My dad handled deliveries, repairs, customer calls, and warehouse work. Victor handled sales. According to my dad, they worked well together for a while. Then Victor got an opportunity to buy out a struggling furniture showroom. He asked my dad to invest. My dad had just gotten married to my mom and didn't want to risk all their savings. He said no. Victor bought the showroom alone. Within a few years, it became successful. Then very successful. And after that, Victor changed. He started telling everyone that he built his company alone. He stopped mentioning my dad's role in the moving business. He started acting like my dad had been too scared to become anything. At family dinners, Victor would say things like, "Some people are comfortable staying small." He always said it with a smile. My dad would just nod and change the subject. But I saw the way his face changed. I saw the way he became quiet afterward. And even as a kid, I knew that Victor's money had become a weapon. When I was 10, Victor gave my cousin Mason a brand new bicycle for his birthday. It was bright red, expensive, and bigger than anything I had ever owned. A month later, for my birthday, Victor handed me a gift card for a discount clothing store. He didn't even know my size. He said, "Your dad told me you like books, but I figured you could use something practical." I thanked him. My mom later used the gift card to buy me winter socks. That was the pattern. Victor gave big gifts to people he wanted to impress. He gave practical leftovers to people he didn't care about. When Mason got accepted into a private school, Victor paid for a celebration dinner at a fancy restaurant. When I got accepted into a competitive public high school program, Victor said, "That's good. Maybe you'll learn how the real world works." Everyone laughed. I didn't understand why it was funny. But I learned early that family laughter can hurt more than strangers' insults. By the time I was in college, I had stopped expecting anything from Victor. I studied computer science at a state university and worked nights at a grocery store to help pay for tuition. My dad wanted to help more, but the repair shop had been struggling. Rent was rising. Parts were getting expensive. Some months, he barely paid himself. Victor could have helped. He didn't have to pay my tuition. He didn't have to give me money. But he could have asked how I was doing. He never did. At Thanksgiving, he would ask Mason about internships, business school, and investment plans. Then he would glance toward me and say, "Still studying computers?" I would say yes. He would nod and move on. Once, I tried explaining that I was building a small inventory software tool for local businesses. Victor laughed. "For auto shops and corner stores?" "Mostly small businesses, yes," I said. He shook his head. "Small businesses don't pay. You'll learn." Then he turned to Mason and started talking about real estate. I went back to school after that dinner feeling embarrassed for even speaking. But I kept working. My final project was a basic management system for small repair shops. It tracked parts, appointments, invoices, technician schedules, and repeat customer issues. I built it because I had watched my dad struggle with paper records his entire life. His shop used old notebooks, receipts in shoeboxes, and a calendar taped to the wall. Customers called constantly asking whether their cars were ready. My dad spent half his day searching through papers. So I created a program for him. At first, it was just for the shop. But within a few months, other mechanics started asking about it. Then a tire shop. Then a small appliance repair company. Then a local plumbing business. I started charging a small monthly fee. Nothing huge. But enough to keep improving the system. After graduation, I got a job as a junior developer at a local software company. During the day, I worked on business software. At night, I worked on my own product. I called it ShopFlow. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have giant investors or fancy launch parties. It solved boring problems. And boring problems were everywhere. Over the next 5 years, ShopFlow grew slowly. I hired one developer, then a customer support person, then a sales coordinator. We rented a small office above a coffee shop. I still drove the same old car. I still wore simple clothes. And because I didn't look successful in the way Victor understood success, he still ignored me. At family events, he would ask what I was doing. I would say, "I run a software company now." He would smile politely. "Good for you." Then he would ask Mason about his new luxury apartment. The strange thing was, I no longer cared. I had stopped trying to earn Victor's respect. My company was paying salaries. It was helping small business owners avoid chaos. It was giving my dad more time to do actual repair work instead of hunting through receipts. That was enough for me. Then, one Saturday morning, my father called. His voice sounded tense. "Your Uncle Victor is here." I was at my apartment, drinking coffee and answering customer emails. "Okay," I said. "Why?" "He says he wants to talk to you." I was quiet for a moment. Victor had never visited my dad's repair shop unless he needed a quick oil change. "What does he want?" "I don't know," Dad said. "But he doesn't look good." So I drove over. Victor was sitting in the tiny office behind the repair bays, wearing an expensive suit that looked completely out of place beside old filing cabinets and the smell of motor oil. My dad stood near the doorway, uncomfortable. Victor stood when I walked in. For a second, he looked at me like he was trying to figure out who I was. Then he said, "Noah. You look well." I almost laughed. That was the closest thing to a compliment I had ever received from him. I said, "Thanks. What's going on?" Victor looked at my dad. "Can we talk privately?" My dad nodded toward the office. You can talk here. Victor's jaw tightened. Then he sat back down. My company has a problem, he said. He explained that one of his biggest furniture warehouses had been losing inventory for months. Not through theft, exactly. Through mistakes. Orders were being duplicated. Deliveries were going to the wrong locations. Items were being marked as returned when they had never been returned. Customers were receiving wrong products, missing products, or duplicate products. The company's internal system was old. Very old. Victor had spent years delaying an upgrade because he didn't trust technology. Now the errors had become so severe that several major suppliers had frozen shipments until invoices were corrected. His regional managers were blaming each other. His finance team was behind. And a major investor was considering pulling out of a planned expansion. Victor looked at me and said, "Your father told me you make software for shops." I looked at my dad. Dad looked embarrassed. I said, "I make operations software for small businesses." Victor nodded slowly. "I need someone who understands systems." I waited. Then he said it. "I need your help." For years, I had imagined this moment. Not exactly like this. But I had imagined Victor finally needing something from me. I thought I would feel powerful. I thought I would feel vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. I asked him, "What have you tried?" He named 3 expensive consulting firms. They had all created reports, presentations, and recommendations. None of them had fixed the actual problem. I asked, "Have they been inside the warehouse?" Victor looked confused. "Of course they have." "Have they talked to the people who scan the products? The people loading trucks? The people receiving returns? The people who deal with customer complaints?" He paused. "I assume someone has." That answer told me everything. I said, "I'll look at it." Victor looked relieved. Then I added, "But I'm not doing it as a favor." His expression changed. I wasn't asking for charity. "No," I said. "You were asking because you're out of options." The office went quiet. My dad looked at me, but I kept going. "If ShopFlow works with your company, it will be under a contract. My team will have full access to the systems, the warehouses, and the staff. No one will hide information from us. No one will blame my team for problems we didn't create. And you will pay our standard rate." Victor stared at me. "You're going to charge me?" "Yes." His face tightened. Then he said, "Fine." I nodded. "Then my assistant will send the agreement." For the first time in my life, Victor looked at me like I wasn't just his younger brother's kid. He looked at me like I was a professional. We started at the main warehouse the following Monday. I brought 2 developers, a logistics analyst, and our customer support manager. Victor's executives expected us to stay in conference rooms. I refused. The first thing I did was walk the floor. I talked to warehouse workers. I watched how deliveries arrived. I watched how returns were processed. I watched employees scan furniture pieces, label damaged items, move pallets, and handle customer orders. Within 2 days, we found the problem. Actually, we found several problems. Victor's company had grown too fast, but its processes had not. Different warehouses were using different item codes. Some employees had created personal shortcuts because the old system was too slow. Returns were being processed manually in one location and automatically in another. The customer service department had a separate database that did not properly communicate with the warehouse system. And one manager had been hiding errors for months because he was afraid Victor would fire him. It wasn't one person's fault. It was a culture problem. People were afraid to admit mistakes. Because Victor had built a company where being wrong was treated like being weak. I presented the findings to Victor and his executive team. Victor listened with his arms crossed. One of his managers tried to interrupt. "We've been saying this is a staff training issue," she said. "No," I replied. "It's a systems issue. Your employees are working around broken processes because no one has given them a safe way to report problems." Victor looked at me sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your company is not losing money because your staff doesn't care. You're losing money because your staff is afraid." The room went silent. I knew I had crossed a line. But I was done being afraid of people with expensive watches. Victor dismissed the meeting early. That evening, he called me. I expected him to end the contract. Instead, he asked, "Do you really believe that?" "Yes." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do we do?" And that was the moment everything changed. Not because Victor suddenly became a good person. Not yet. But because for the first time, he was willing to listen. Over the next 4 months, my team rebuilt his inventory processes. We did not replace everything overnight. We started with the warehouse that had the worst errors. We created one item coding system. We trained employees. We added simple reporting tools. We created a process where staff could flag issues without being blamed. We connected customer service, returns, suppliers, and warehouse data so everyone could see the same information. And slowly, the chaos started to disappear. Orders became accurate. Returns were tracked. Suppliers resumed shipments. The investor stayed. But the biggest change happened in Victor. He started coming to warehouse meetings. At first, everyone was nervous around him. They would stop talking when he entered the room. But after a while, he started asking questions instead of giving orders. "What would make this easier? Why does this process slow you down? What do you need from me?" It was awkward at first. But it mattered. One afternoon, I found him standing near a loading dock talking to an employee named Rosa. Rosa had worked there for 12 years. She had been the one quietly correcting inventory errors in a notebook because the system didn't record them properly. Victor asked her why she had never told management. Rosa looked at him and said, "We did." Nobody listened. Victor didn't argue. He just nodded. Then he said, "I'm sorry." I stood nearby, pretending to look at my phone. But I heard it. And I knew he meant it. 6 months after we began, Victor's company had recovered more inventory than anyone expected. Supplier relationships improved. Customer complaints dropped. The expansion project resumed. Victor invited my entire team to a company dinner. At first, I didn't want to go. I assumed it would be another event where Victor gave a speech about himself and thanked everyone except the people who did the work. But my dad encouraged me. "He's trying," Dad said. So I went. The dinner was held at one of Victor's showrooms after hours. The space had been transformed with tables, lights, and catered food. Employees from the warehouses, customer service teams, managers, suppliers, and executives were there. Victor stood near a small stage with a microphone. I expected him to talk about profits. Instead, he said, "For years, I believed success meant having the answers." The room became quiet. I thought being a leader meant never looking uncertain. I thought people should work harder instead of asking more questions. He looked directly at me. And that mindset almost destroyed this company. I froze. Victor continued. "My nephew Noah came here when I was out of options. He did not come here to rescue me. He came here as a professional, and he made us confront things we had ignored for too long." Then he looked at the employees. He reminded me that the people closest to the work often understand the work better than the people in the office. He took a breath. And I owe him an apology. My father was standing near the back of the room. I could see his eyes filling with tears. Victor looked at me. In my family, I spent years praising ambition while ignoring character. I measured people by money, appearances, and status. I treated Noah like he was less important because he didn't look successful in the way I understood success. The room was completely silent. And I was wrong. He stepped away from the microphone. Then he walked toward me. He held out his hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not just for how I treated you when I needed your help. For how I treated you when I didn't." I looked at him. I thought about every birthday gift that felt like an afterthought. Every family dinner where he ignored me. Every time he used my father's life as a warning. Every time I had wanted him to notice me. And I realized something. I didn't need him to. Not anymore. I shook his hand. "Thank you," I said. That was all. My uncle offered to invest in ShopFlow after that. He said he wanted to help us expand. A younger version of me would have been thrilled. But I told him I would only consider it if it made sense for my company and my team. He smiled. Fair enough. We eventually worked out a partnership, not because he was family, but because the business terms were right. And because by then, he had finally learned something my father had known all along: success is not about being the loudest person in the room. It is not about having the biggest house, the most expensive car, or the most people impressed by you. Success is about how you treat the people who cannot do anything for you. My uncle ignored me for most of my life. Then he needed my help. But the real victory wasn't that he apologized. It wasn't that he respected me. It wasn't even that he invested in my company. The real victory was that I had built a life where his approval was no longer necessary. I had stopped being the quiet nephew waiting to be noticed. I had become someone who knew his worth. Thank you for watching Calm Verdict Stories. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Have you ever been ignored by a family member until they suddenly needed something from you? Subscribe for more stories about family karma, boundaries, quiet success, betrayal, respect, and life lessons. Until next time, stay focused, stay confident, and never let anyone else decide your value.